Kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. My name is Tatiana Tavares. I'm a senior lecturer in communication design at AUT University. And the name of this presentation is Paradoxical Sense, Polyvocality in an Interactive AR Digital Narrative. To start the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. I'm a Brazilian born, living in New Zealand for the past 15 years. I was born in a lower middle class suburb of São Paulo, Brazil. My mother was a third generation Italian, and my father was a mixture of French, Portuguese, and indigenous ancestry. In relation to the project I'm showing you today, it's interesting to mention that when I was a child, my mother engaged in many different forms of non-traditional practices, including me and my siblings spending many nights in candomblé and Umbanda ceremonies, and also in conversation with the spiritual entities and offerings and waterfalls. There's a photo of myself when I was about 7 years old. You can see me and my cousins, and we spend many of our holidays on this place. And I have most of those magical and spiritual memories from, spending time on that location. Also, it's interesting to mention this because a lot of the creative work I do relates to my cultural background. This is my master project I completed in 2011, and I discussed the nature of the liminal immigrant, bricolage identity, and the role of artistic inquiry in interrogating complexities of self-experience. The practical work is a picture book, and I use the metaphors of carnival to communicate the sense of disconnection and ambivalence I experienced as an immigrant in New Zealand. The illustrative style of this work got carried on into my PhD project, which is artistic practice-led thesis concerned with the potential of polyvocality and interactive digital narrative. The practical work is called Sense of Paradox and is constructed as a printed picture book, as you can see on the image on the left, and can be expanded through the use of AR technology. This image here shows the size of the book and also a tablet device, and you can see that you can access the storyline through pressing buttons on a tablet device, and images, sounds, and animations are triggered. So when the pages I scan, the user can select narrations from 3 different saints: the mother of benevolence, the father of pragmatism, and the father of orthodoxy. Each of those saints has a distinctive monologue, soundscape, video, and animated interpretations that plays out over the printed picture. The app, it's available now at Google Play for Android, and I'm also getting it available to Apple devices soon. So the image that shows the 3 saints, and you can also see when you scan the printed image, 3 buttons appear, and you are able to select each of them, and different images, sounds are triggered by for each of those buttons. An image of those 3 saints, and also interesting to know that the saints, they present interconnected but diverging interpretations of the events shaped by their distinct theological positions. The fictional story entails a woman, her name is Elsa, who mourns the disappearance of her lover, who is called Euclides, and in the 1964 Brazilian coup d'etat. And Elsa lives for 40 years in a room of accumulated memory, waiting for Euclides to return, and he never does. The scan image reveals an interactive parallax that produces a sense of 3-dimensional space that functions not only as a technical but also a conceptual component on the story. Theoretically, this story navigates relationship between the real and the imagined and refers to magical real binary modes of textual representation, and the sense meanings on the story negotiates an unreliable, sometimes paradoxical pathway between rational and irrational accounting and polyvocal narration. The narrative experience resides primarily in the unstable virtual world of the AI environment, and the printed book functions as this enigmatic, unoccupied vessel that waits for each sense interpretation of an episode in the story. So you can see here on this image, the left-hand side is the printed image, and it doesn't contain the actors. And on the three little images on the right, you can see the variations of color, also objects, and the characters, they do different things. Representative of the three different versions of the story. The sounds also change accordingly for each of those variations. Because of this, we encounter a sense of kind of ontological reversal, where the virtual, the AI environment, answers the ambiguities presented by the real, the book. Some images of the sequential illustrations in the picture book. Also a picture of the book. You can see the book has been constructed as a concertina, and this refers to the parallax on the AI environment and also to this theatrical and carnivalesque style of the illustrations. Religious syncretism operates as a reference to Brazilian culture and used to communicate this negotiation of different voices and points of view. Fragments of imagery may be considered semiotic markers and suggest syncretic completeness. The images are composed with many, many pieces of images in Photoshop, and I use the Wacom tablet to illustrate on top of them. Methodologically, I use a post-positivist paradigm. I consider my project a practice-led research, where the inquiry is led by practice. In this sense, the researcher is led forward through a process of critical reflection towards insights that contribute to knowledge. I use heuristic inquiry for its flexibility, discovery, and refinement of ideas through indwelling explicitness. I explain this form of indwelling also by the way I found Elsa, the main character, in a historical place, and I dwell with her, feeling her reactions and coming to understand why she behaved the way she did. And through this process of indwelling, I experience what shaped her. Methods are cyclical, and they operate in four phases, starting with this ideational process of journaling, moving towards iterative assembly with material thinking, visualization, and rough image assemblage. Third, the strategic use of feedback through exhibitions and installations. And finally, collaboration and collaboration through sound design, production, and assembling of final work. So images of the beginning of my field journal documenting my trip to Brazil. Some images of my ideational drawings on my visual journal, which was very helpful in the construction of a narrative in the beginning of the project. A diagram created with a timeline for Euclides and Elsa, and indicating the life journey and also the relationship with historical moments. Image of the specialized feedback, where I tested the communicative aspect of the work, the narration, and also the structure of the narrative. I invited designers, technicians, specialists, and they provide me feedback that helped me to move forward. Images of the collaboration, the filming for Sense of Paradox on green screen. I also collaborated with sound designers and the construction of the AI environment with other designers and technicians. This is a process of iterative assembly, where you can see how I started with these images as rough clear cuts, and I progressed towards more refined composition in Photoshop, adding shadow and color correction. And after that, I moved to After Effects and included rotoscoping, animation, and later this will progress into the AR development. So finally, the significance of this project sits in 4 areas. First, the project contributes to the practice of polyvocal and dialogic storytelling because it constructs a fictional interactive narrative. Also sits on the potential of magical realism to contribute to a culturally distinctive, transcultural, decolonial narrative text. Also demonstrates how parallax can be moved beyond a technical mechanism and applied as a conceptual device for spatially connecting polyvocality and magical realism. Finally, I use the tenets of syncretism as an illustrative fusion of photomontage and parallax. I transform the concept of syncretism into artistic mode, where disparate elements are brought together to form new wholes and create meaning through impossible connections. I'd like to finish with this quote from Nigerian poet Ben Okre when he said, "It is in the creation of a story, the lifting of a story into the realms of art. It is in this that the higher realms of creativity reside." And I like to think that perhaps he was speaking here of something culturally beautiful, something that goes beyond entertainment, that might touch the human condition, both through the intricacy of the structure and the uniqueness of the aesthetic. And Sense of Paradox attempts to do this. So that's me. Kia ora, thank you, obrigada, and I'm open for questions.